Salutations, my children. I'm Savage Thunder 29, and today I'm coming at you with another book review of George O'Connor's and the Olympians. Now, last time I did Zeus, King of the Gods, and today we're going to be doing his daughter, Athena, the gray-eyed goddess. And I figured, since why talking about the goddess of war, why not just have an axe with me in the middle of the video? Now, it's pretty safe to say that Athena is probably one of the coolest of all the Olympian gods, and arguably one of the most, if not the most influential out of all the gods. And George O'Connor really takes advantage of that in this book because it covers all over primary stories, and she's the most Athena in this book as I've ever seen her be in any work besides the mythological material itself. Athena is one of those gods of Greek mythology that I instantly think when seeing them is they belong better in Norse mythology. And honestly she does. You imagine the interactions between her and Odin, they'd be like best friends. Yeah, just imagine a chess game. But anyways, so my first point to comment on this book is the fact that the way the story is told, it's not told like your typical thing. It's told in the perspective of, not really the perspective, but just narrated by the fates, the three women that spin the threads of fate for gods and mortals alike. And why I'm on the subject of those that I appreciate about this book is, and I'll tell you about the part of it later, is the fact that George O'Connor took the time to differentiate between the fates and the three witches that share one eye and one tooth, because a lot of people, Disney gets those two groups mixed up, and they're very much not the same thing. There may be versions of mythology which they refer to as the same thing, but personally I think it makes much more sense than not being the same thing. Ugh, three old ladies, disgusting. But I'll have more to say about three old ladies later. For now, let's jump into the first part of the book, where Athena's birth takes place. And this is a really interesting part of the book, and I think it might allude to this in mythology, but not so much as this book does, is most of you will know that Zeus devoured Metis, his first wife, and you don't really like devour her, but the way there's different versions, like one version is where he devours her, another version is where he turns into a drop of water and swallows her type of thing. It's Greek mythology. But anyways, in this book, Zeus takes her out and and he tricks her by having her shape-shift into a dragonfly in a shape-shifting competition. He turns into this eagle and swoops down and just nabs her. And it's not like the whole thing of actually being eaten. She's just like taking into he like psychically took her into his conscious, and she's trapped in his head type of thing. And she's there for and this is one of those disgusting things Zeus does. One of many things that come is he all did it just so he could be with Hera, make her his queen. And honestly, I don't know what he saw in Hera, the whole giraffe neck thing, and personality in general. But anyways, he has Metis trapped inside of his conscious, but what he didn't know, and side note, is he did that because, not just so he could make her his queen, which is part of the motive, he did that because Gaia prophesied that his child from Metis will overthrow him. But when he devoured Metis into his subconscious, what he didn't know is the fact that she was pregnant already, and she has Athena within the mind of Zeus. And Athena, I think this really, this is a really cool thing that George O'Connor did in the book, is explaining before Athena bursted from Zeus's skull. I know that sounds weird, but I'll get to that in a minute. The way she became the goddess of war makes sense to me. And it doesn't really come out to say that this is the way she became the goddess of war, but when she was in Zeus's mind, she had the battle against, it would say it's like a dream world. She had the battle against his fears and anxieties and all the forms they took inside of his mind. So she came out into the real world out of Zeus's mind as already a powerful warrior and a conqueror because of the things she's facing there. She just didn't magically have this gift of being just this fantastic warrior, so to speak. Describes her aspect of being the goddess of war. And we get to the part where she's the goddess of wisdom, because we all know her mother Metis was considered a patron of good counsel, so to speak, and that's why Zeus, one of the advantages Zeus had of keeping her inside of his head, because she would give him advice, and that's probably why things started really going downhill later on after she was out of his head, because there was no longer he literally lost common sense after that. But Athena, the way she's the goddess of wisdom is because in the book she doesn't remember her mother taking care of her inside of Zeus's mind, but she remembers small memories, and she says she could sometimes hear her talking inside of her head. So I think that alludes to the fact that Metis is probably now in Athena's head rather than Zeus, and thus giving Athena an extra aspect of that good counsel aspect. I know they keep saying aspect, but that's what makes her the goddess of wisdom, even though she's probably already really naturally smart, which we all know, but she also has that extra thing inside of her head to advise her all the time, but she doesn't really know that's her mother. She just thinks that's just a part of her brain that makes her super cool because she's automatically smarter than everybody, sort of thing. Now we move on to the part where Athena is actually brought into this world through very unnatural means, even for a god. And I love this part because Metis is inside Zeus's head, and she's forging Athena's armor and shields and spear and stuff inside of Zeus's head for Athena's debut, and this is causing major clanging inside of Zeus's skull, and he's just freaking out, and he just walks into Hephaestus's forge and just says, and just basically tells him to split open his skull. I mean, how creative. And then Hephaestus and Ares just freaking throw him down, just lining it up and just BAM! I just thought it was funny. That's the first thing they think of to get rid of the pain in his head, is just to split open his freaking skull. What is Greek mythology for you? So Hephaestus commences smashing his father's head apart, and Athena comes bursting forth, which probably freaked the freaking crap out of all of them. I mean, imagine sitting there watching your sister just burst from your dad's head like nothing. I mean, you just split your dad's head open, and all of a sudden, boom, your sister just comes out of that crack. Your dad's head is split wide open, and she's just screaming like a freaking warrior maniac, and you're just sitting there and you gotta look at that. And I mean, what do you say to that? Like, welcome. So after Athena was born from her father's forehead, you don't say that every day. She moves on, and she finds no interest amongst the usual occupations of the gods. It describes that she is a particularly genius craftsman, but she has no patience for the heat of the forge like Hephaestus. She doesn't have patience for the mindless brutality of Ares, and most of all, she doesn't have any interest whatsoever in child making or marriage or anything of such, which is what makes her one of the cooler gods throughout mythology. She's not freaking screwing around all the time, or she's not her father in that aspect. She's got all her father's sometimes good leadership qualities without that. And that's what makes her one of the best of the gods. But anyways, she can't find an occupation, so she goes out on a spree of learning. She's just out in the mortal world trying to learn as much as she can. And she's trading with all these other women in this combat setting. And it's under the watch of Triton and Poseidon's son. And all of a sudden Zeus is coming there. So Triton decides to hold a battle or games in his honor, so to speak. And Pallas, Triton's daughter, and Athena are there talking. And Pallas, you know, I'm glad Pallas is dead. Let's just get right to it. I mean, she's the pinnacle of perversion. Her and Athena are sitting there talking to each other, and then Pallas all of a sudden sits having girl talk with Athena. And I hate girl talk, but I'll get to that in some other video. She starts freaking having girl talk with Athena, and she freaking tells Athena how hot her father is. I mean, put yourself in Athena's position. How are you supposed to respond to that? I mean, imagine your best friend telling you how hot your dad is. I mean, and the look on Athena's face tells it all. I mean, every time Pallas looks at Zeus, Athena is just the stare of death into Pallas' eyes. And I can see why, because Pallas, you see the way she looks at Zeus, it's perversion. And Zeus shows up in that moment, and he's like, hey, in typical Zeus fashion. And obviously he can tell that Pallas has this thing going for him. So anyways, Zeus shows up, and he's like, hey, typical Zeus fashion, he's just walking in. And it's funny because there's this whole build-up in that part of how Zeus is going to show up, and you would expect him to show up in like some big chariot, just mighty and stuff like that. No, he just comes out of the shadows like, hey, my daughter, and this chick, and Pallas instantly starts flirting with him. And of course, knowing Zeus, he takes that to heart instantly, and Athena's disgust with him is growing even more. But that's not the biggest part of the thing. We move on to the part where the games that take place in Zeus's honor. Athena and Pallas are pit against each other, and they're both pretty evenly matched. Athena, of course, being the goddess of war, and Pallas, because they were fighting with spears, has an advantage because she's the granddaughter of Poseidon, and it's in her bloodline to be able to wield long things proficient. And at first it looks like Athena's going to win, but then Pallas kind of gets the upper hand, and Zeus is like, So he has the Aegis on, the Aegis, I don't know how to pronounce it, that Pallas is pretty fascinated before, and he's like, hey, look at my sexy cape. And Pallas is just, and that causes Athena to accidentally stab Pallas in the gut. Like I said, this is Greek mythology, this is everyday stuff. So she does, and Athena feels pretty guilty about it, and Zeus tries to comfort her the best Zeus can do. And Athena, of course it was an accident, even Triton knew it was an accident, everybody knows it was an accident, but Athena knew the disgust she had in her heart because of Pallas' attraction with Zeus, and so she kind of attributes, maybe, she feels guilty because that played into a factor, but it was an accident regardless. Probably one of the first times I've heard of one of the gods of war killing somebody as an accident, to be honest. So anyways, Zeus, in his best way of trying to comfort Athena, gives her the Aegis, his cape, and that sort of becomes an icon of Athena that she wears all the time throughout the rest of mythology. And then we move on to the part. Then we move on to the part where of the let me see if I can pronounce this, Gigantomachy. The War of the Giants. It's just War of the Giants. Okay, I don't pronounce it perfect for you to get my point. If you read mythology, you know, so step up! So the Giant War is where Athena really has the chance to display just exactly who she is to the rest of the gods. And the giants are warring with the gods because they're another plan by Gaia to get revenge on Zeus for keeping the Titans imprisoned. And the giants just roll up and they're like, hey, Gaia told us that you think we're better than us. Like typical meathead fashion. I mean, who goes to a huge war based on that? I mean, well, thinking of the Greek world, pretty common. But this is another explanation of how Athena becomes known as Pallas Athena. And I forgot to mention that in the part where she actually fought Pallas, is after she killed Pallas on accident, she felt so guilty that she took Pallas's name in Pallas's honor, so she became known as Pallas Athena. And the War of the Giants is the other story where she possibly may become known as that because of that. So the gods of the Olympus just annihilate the Titans. I mean the giants. Sorry. It's like no challenge whatsoever as far as I can see. They're just annihilating them. The only challenge I could see is when Ares is sitting there grumbling about Athena giving orders and he just gets whacked into the horizon. But that's about it. They're just mopping the floor with the giants. And all of a sudden Pallas, the leader of the giants, rolls up. And he's like, I'm impenetrable, you can't kill me. And Athena's like, watch me. And he's supposed to have like an impenetrable hide, and so Athena works around this by just turning his hide into stone and just smashing it that way, and that's what kills him. And she just rips off his impenetrable hide and throws it on the Aegis, and then all of a sudden now she's impenetrable in that fact. So that's the other story of how she became known as Pallas Athena. And the book, the Fates, I keep wanting to call them the Norns because I've studied Norse mythology for the past couple of years and just recently getting back into Greek mythology. But the Fates, they describe that it said that she got the name from one or the other, or who's to say it isn't both. And I like how George O'Connor did that because I'm not sure if those are, if you look at it in mythology, maybe, I'm not sure of this, but if those are two conflicting stories that hasn't been decided on in mythology, then, and he applied both of those and says that maybe that's both, then I think that's a very creative way to handle it because there's lots of contradicting stories in Greek mythology, and combining them together like that and making use of both of them for the same purpose, same outcome of it, is a really clever way to handle it. So anyways, we move past the whole Pallas Athena part, and we get to probably one of the more iconic parts, more well-known stories of Athena, and that is when she turns Medusa into Medusa. And there's lots of controversy on this subject and about which version is the truth or not. And first let me tell you the story the book describes. So Medusa is this priestess of Athena. She's given her life to Athena, so that means no funky town or no, you get what I mean, nothing like that. So, but anyways, Poseidon rolls up and is like, watch this. And Medusa takes him in. I mean, I don't get this. I mean, it has to be Poseidon trolling. That's all it has to be. I mean, because if he really wanted to be with her that bad, why didn't they just go do it in a field or something? But they had to make it 10 times worse by doing it inside of Athena's temple. I mean, Athena's the goddess of wisdom, and you honestly think she's not going to find out I mean, for literal God's sakes, I mean, come on. You're you're just playing at fire at that point, especially with somebody that has no understanding and no interest or compassion towards sexual drive at all. I mean, absolute disgust for it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a troll by Poseidon. It just, because, yeah, I don't know what the timeline is of this taking place, whether it's after the fact that Athena took Athens away from Poseidon and he's just bitter about it. But if that is ahead of that, then that would make sense for a reason why. That, or he's just always had a disgust for Athena in the first place. But but the other story of this is that Poseidon, this is where the controversy gets in, is that Poseidon raped Medusa on the temple floor of Athena, and Athena had pity on Medusa and turned her into who she is, so that way she never has to deal with that again. And that can, and a lot of people like to use that version as a way to see Athena in a light of being being like a savior to women, sort of thing, and just a really good person in general. And I can see that, but what we have to remember, and it's like Red over at Overly Sarcastic Productions said, which is a great channel, you should go check it out if you want to learn more about mythology, is Greek mythology really has no canon. It's just a bunch of things thrown together, a bunch of different interpretations, a bunch of different stories told, and this story of Medusa is told by different people, and if you go, it's like she said, if you go back to a certain point, there really is no origin story for Medusa. She's just this monster that's there. But in a later date, they decided to give her some sort of origin story, and any of these origin stories can be applied depending on what you want, because it really has no canon. And if you want to get technical, she has no origin story, and I won't get in on that because I don't know much about what I'm talking about. I just know what I've been told. So let's just move past that. Oh, and the other version is that both Poseidon and Athena are the major jerks in one scenario, rather than just one being a jerk in one scenario and the other being a jerk in another scenario. The other version is where they're both jerks in this scenario, and that's where Poseidon makes her, he rapes her on the temple floor of Athena. Athena is disgusted by Medusa after the fact and turns into Medusa, which I don't prefer that version. Honestly, I don't prefer any version that has rape in it, even though that is a common thing in the Greek mythos. But that's the version I prefer is honestly this version. I mean, it just depends on what you want to use it for in the context of how you see the story. But honestly, I just prefer this reason for reasons I won't go into right now. So we move past the whole Medusa thing, and we get to a part of the book where it's not so much focused on Athena as much. It's just more focused on her involvement in the story. And what I like about these books is they focus mainly on the gods, but they also incorporate many stories of the minor figures in mythology as well. Like they focus on Hercules and Perseus and etc. And some of the books where it's not really focused so much on the god, like in actually no, I won't spoil it. But in this book with Athena, it covers the story of Perseus and the fact that she's involved with the whole thing of him going to kill Medusa and stuff. So we get to the point where Perseus is, he's basically nothing. So the birth of Perseus. So his mother was the wife of king, whose name I'm not remembering right now because I just read the book again yesterday. But this king heard that his son would overthrow him. So he had his wife placed in this tower, and she called upon, sorry, I keep getting hair in my mouth. She calls upon Zeus, and Zeus comes down in the form of a golden rain, and as she has him puddled in her hands, and he's just looking at her, and you know exactly what he came there for at that point. And but anyways, that's Perseus. All I'm saying is, you know, Zeus is Perseus' father. I don't need to explain anything else for you. But so she becomes pregnant with Perseus, and the king hears about this, so he puts her and Perseus in this crate, throws them in the ocean, and in which they are saved. And and Perseus' mother becomes married to this other king, but the king doesn't want Perseus as an illegitimate heir, so he sends him on this impossible quest, which is to kill Medusa. And Perseus goes on his way. He's basically ditzy at this point, doesn't really know what's going on. But then Athena and Hermes step in. Of course, it's always those two. They're the drama seekers that like stir things up for entertainment. And Hermes is like Athena's little minion sidekick that follows her around, and she's the one that does all the talking. But and a side note to mention about Hermes, one thing I'm impressed with that George O'Connor did is the fact of his boots. Hermes' boots have always irritated me, and honestly, I don't think that they haven't irritated anybody at some point in their life. The stupid sandals with the freaking white literal feather wings on the side. I mean, come on! We can do better than that. And George O'Connor really handles this well, because he makes them like these bronze sandal boot things that come up to almost his knee, and it has like metal wings coming off there, not literal wings. I mean, why? So yeah, I thought that was cool how he handled that. But anyways, Athena and Hermes give him all these gifts and stuff like that. Athena gives her his sword and shield and stuff, and Hermes gives him a pair of boots, and he goes off, and that whole part is kind of funny, but I'm not going to get into that because I already spoil these books enough by just taking step by step. I don't need to spoil the funny parts, the little spices that George O'Connor put in there type of thing. So Perseus goes off, and he runs into the three witches that share one eye and one tooth. He does the whole thing like he's known for taking their eye and basically threatening them that they'll never see it again, which irony right there. And they tell him where Medusa is. He goes there. He kills Medusa by seeing her through the reflection of Athena's shield and cutting her head off. And then Athena shows up and like just grotesquely plucks the snakes out of her head and adds them to the Aegis, which her whole thing with the Aegis kind of reminds me of like Thanos with the stones type of things. Like she's constantly adding more to it, and honestly, it's a bit much if you ask me. The freaking giant scales on it and snakes hanging off of it. I mean, that's gaudy if anything has ever been gaudy. But that was been Athena's whole involvement in it, and it moves on to where Perseus has the whole story where he saves Andromeda from Cetus because her dad made the mistake of insulting the beauty of the sea nymphs and comparing their beauty to his own daughter. And honestly, if you live in the ancient Greek world with the Greek gods, you'd think that after everything that transpires that you should never, under any circumstances whatsoever, mention, and that's just in a positive note, I wouldn't even do that. I'd just say clear the subject in general, just leave it there. Talk about any of the gods' physical appeal, because that causes nothing but trouble. and you'll find out why in a very later review of Aphrodite. So Perseus flies in ahead of Cetus, the giant sea monster, and saves Andromeda, which is the princess of Ethiopia. And one thing I like that George O'Connor did, he actually made her an Ethiopian. Like, she's not some white blonde Greek type of a thing, like most Clash of the Titans depicts her to be. And I thought that was cool because it adds more realism to the story and the fact of locality. So I thought that was cool. Then Athena's kind of final involvement in Perseus' story at that point is Perseus becomes king, and the previous king runs off and kind of hides and spies on Perseus, and Perseus doesn't get a chance to take revenge on him, kill him for trying to send him off to kill him. So Perseus is doing this, playing these games as a victory for his victory over Medusa, and he's throwing this discus, but he throws it off by some point, and he's surprised because obviously he's a hero and should be able to throw it properly. It goes off into the crowd and kills somebody, which turns out to be the former king. And Athena's just sitting there like, and the face just say fate has mysterious ways of doing things, so you know exactly who did that. And we move on to one of the possibly most if one of the most well-known stories about Athena, and that's the story of Arachne. And Athena, well, I won't go into too much detail on that, you know it, but one things I will comment on is when Arachne is making her tapestry, and Athena is making her tapestry. Athena depicts the gods as these grandiose beings, these royal, majestic things, and Arachne depicts them as absolute fools. I love how George O'Connor did her tapestry. I mean, it's just the only person in there that isn't looking like a fool that he depicts is Athena. It's just her whole thing with accidentally standing palace, but the rest of it is just freaking Zeus as animals chasing down women. And I won't go into that, but just the part that got me, and I couldn't even handle it, is the part where Zeus's head is on a freaking swan. He's just flipping this girl in the eye. I broke at that part. I was laughing. So anyways, you can imagine what happened to Arachne after Athena saw exactly what happened with her whole tapestry. And honestly, what she did to Arachne, there's a lot worse things that she could have done. So I would rather be some spider humanoid thing than some of the other painful. And let's just say she's very lucky that it wasn't Zeus that was in the competition with her. Otherwise, she may have found herself in a totally different situation than just being some ugly creature. My last two things to comment on this review is one, the presence of owls through the whole thing. The owl is seen as the symbol of Athena, and the way George O'Connor utilizes this is pretty cool. It reminds me of, it's very similar to the fact that ravens work with Odin. Athena could see through their eyes, and etc., etc. And there was always an owl present or somewhere watching or something like that, and she could speak in the owl language. That was a cool aspect because not a lot of people delve into the fact of the whole owl thing with Athena, and at least from what I've seen. The second point I want to comment on is the fact that Demeter, throughout the beginning of the story, when it's showing the whole thing with Athena being born and stuff like that, is she has Persephone, and it doesn't come out and say it, but you just see her in the background sort of the thing as a little child. I thought that was a cool aspect because it doesn't delve into that, and it shows part of a story without telling that story sort of thing. So I thought that was really cool. So I think the whole moral of the story is Athena is one of the baddest there is, and definitely do exactly what she tells you to do, and just don't complain about it, and don't do anything that's going to upset her, because very bad things will happen. So I think the moral of the story with Athena is that you should definitely never do anything that's going to upset her, because bad things will always happen, and she's a very useful ally. So I think the main picture this book depicts is the fact that you should never mess with Athena, because bad things will always happen. She's very wise and strategic, but she's not the most compassionate type, to say the least. Except for the fact in Dionysus that don't get me started on the whole thing of Dionysus. Go watch Overly Sarcastic Productions videos on that. They explain it a lot better than I can, but from what I remember, that he was torn apart by the Titans or something like that, and she had him rebuilt from his heart or something. And that's pretty much one of the main compassionate acts I think of Athena. Most everything else she did was for entertainment purposes, which I don't blame her. If I had to live amongst the Olympian gods, I would seek out other entertainment as well. Like I was saying earlier, one of the things I appreciate about these books is the way they handle things that seem conflicting, and except for the case within, the only thing that he didn't handle that was a conflicting set of stories in this book was the tale of Medusa, and honestly I agree with the version he chose to go with, because I need to stop saying the same things twice in the same sentence. I won't say, I'm not gonna, no, that means I'd say it again. But anyways, I can see why he chose that version, because obviously these books are more set for kids and for young readers that are going to learn about mythology, and also it just makes more sense to the story, and it really paints Athena in a better picture, and it doesn't paint anybody in a bad picture, a really bad picture really, because Poseidon doing that was obviously a jerk of him, but nobody's doing anything that bad, and nobody's neglecting the victimization and just being pissed at them about it. That's why I just prefer this version better, because it just doesn't have any of that stuff. But anyways, I like how he handles things like that, and I like the fact of how he incorporates the hero stories within the books. And I like this book in the fact that it covers just different parts of her stories, and he handles that well in the flow of the story without just cutting to different parts of it. He has the fates explaining it, and through their point of view, you're hearing it from them. They're just telling different stories of her, and because they're the fates, you wonder if they're making her story, if all this is transpiring as they're saying this, because they're weaving fate together, which kind of alluded to at the end, because at the end it shows a tapestry they weaved together of her, which is ironic in the fact that their last story was about tapestries. But hey, I'm rambling on. But anyways, I like the flow of the story, and I like how it includes other aspects of mythology that the gods are involved in, but it may not also always necessarily show the depth of their characters, so to speak. It's a nice flow, and the books change pace from here to there, and I think it keeps your interest peaked, sort of thing. But that's what I have to say about that. So that'll do it for this review. This has been Athena, the Grey-Eyed Goddess, probably one of my favorites out of all of these things. And as you can see, it's a very cool cover, impressive. And like the Zeus, King of the Gods ones, it has a shiny aspect to the cover. That's really cool. If I ever make graphic novels or comic books and stuff, I would love to have the same kind of style, without copying, of course. But anyways, yeah, that'll do it for this review. And as I'll say, with every end of the review I do of George O'Connor's work, is if you are interested in mythology and you're looking for a depiction that's not only fairly accurate in most everything and depicts things fairly and very cool at the same time, and also is makes it where the most simple-minded person could understand, and just takes like nonsensical things like I talked about in the last review video and makes them more realistic. Though it is meant more for kids, and for at least from what I've heard, it adds a sense of realism to it that I haven't really seen as far as it depicts things. So if you're interested in mythology, then there will be a link in the description for this book series, and you can go to Amazon and buy it there. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend buying all of them. I still need to buy Ares and Apollo and all the other ones that he's made because I only have the first 6 volumes. But yeah, I have no regrets about this series. So if you're interested in mythology, which I probably should stop saying because I keep repeating the same words and sentences, then just go buy it because it's really good. We'll be hitting it next time in a book review with probably my least favorite of all the gods, Hera. The last part of her name says it all. Hera. I think everybody has that, but Hera is mentioned. But something to look forward to. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to hit the like and subscribe and share. Also, catch new videos Mondays and Saturdays. Savage out.